The bad news is that as you're in this greening, you know, honey. You know that you're more confident than all those other Christians around you. And you're really tempted to tell them, yeah. And that's where you start to go wrong, because then it stops being about he must increase and I must decrease, and instead you're the one increasing in his name. Ooh, yeah. Just like the Crusades, worst thing that can happen to you. But you'll fall down a lot and do that, and you'll get spanked for it. So of the few people who even make it into the green zone, spiritual adulthood, most of them don't make it out. And this is why. They get cocky. This is the downside of that phase. Okay? In spiritual childhood, the downside was, I don't want to grow up. I like these sing-alongs, and I like getting re-evangelized every Sunday. In spiritual adolescence, the problem was, how do I want to put this? Well, you know how teenagers are. So port that over to spiritual teenagers. But in adulthood, oh baby, you're competent, see? And you're more competent than everybody you know. And it's real easy to get legalistic and pissed off, and you're going to get spanked by God so much as a spiritual adult you can't even begin to guess at it. It's in Hebrews 12:5. And of course, probably most of the people who are actually going to listen to this and understand it are probably already in adulthood, so you know what I'm talking about. Anyway, this spiritual adulthood phase, somewhat analogous to human adulthood, lasts for a long time. I mean, what would really be ideal is if we grew up in the same number of years spiritually as we do as human beings. In other words, ideally, spiritual childhood would only last 10 years, spiritual adolescence would only last another 10, and then spiritual adulthood would last 30 years or so. But it doesn't usually play that way. If you manage to weather all the spanking, what will happen is that he really does increase in your life and you really do decrease. And you go through a whole lot of really tumultuous times to get to the final box, which is olive. Because the entire stage of spiritual maturity is war. It is entirely war. So before you get there, certain things are going to happen to you in order for you to get there. One of the biggest hurdles, well, two of them. Two of the biggest hurdles that occur during the light green spiritual adulthood, and they usually occur in the latter half. You're going to get some prosperity that you always wanted, and you got to learn to say no to it. It's worst kind of no that you got to learn how to say, because you're going to have to learn how to have it and yet not care about it at the same time. That's a tough one. The second main category of testing that occurs, and it can start real early, and it's iterative. And if you flunk, you have to take the test again. The second main category of testing during the light green spiritual adulthood is what my pastor kind of likes to call disaster testing. He actually classifies it in 8 ways. Disaster testing, thought testing, system testing, people testing, I forget all the minor classifications, but it's really basically a prosperity test, having something that you want that's not God, and learning how not to care that you have it. And the second category, and this really fails most Christians, God takes himself away from you. I mean, that's what happened on the cross. So you have to get a prototypical version of it. God seems to abandon you. God seems to reject you. You have things in your life that you need to have function, and they don't. You need your body to function, and it craps out on you. Maybe you get in an accident. Maybe you get sick. Maybe it's somebody else in your life. Maybe it's something in your job that you just can't get it to work right. Maybe you lose your job. Whatever is going to most get to you in the category that you most want and in the category you most don't want, that's going to happen. Because the important thing is kind of like this test with Job, only this is a lower version. No, it's not a lower version, it's a higher version, I'm sorry. Job's testing was lower than what we go through. You have to get it so that your identification with God, your love for God, is independent of whether God's nice to you. And it's also independent of competing enjoyments. And that's a really hard thing to do. Most Christians don't. I mean, there's less than 0.0001% of Christians in history who make it into the final olive box. Okay? And therefore, maybe 1% of Christians even make it into spiritual adulthood, and almost nobody makes it out. If you make it out, this final box, it will be characterized by one attitude only. Now, all the other problem-solving devices that you saw, they're 10 thought patterns basically. They're still operating. But as you're moving right on the page, the thought pattern dominates. Okay, the box that you're in. Like, for example, if you move right to plus H, sharing the happiness of God, the happiness at that point is dominating. Dikaio is the operative actor verb in your life, the header verb. And you'll notice it starts staying on. And all the other verbs and all the other thoughts cycle through it. But in that final box, there's only one person in your life. I mean, he has totally taken over your life in your own mind by your own choice. Your thoughts are continually on Christ. That is the final phase. That is what Paul's talking about in Ephesians 3:15 through 19. That is what Paul's talking about in 2 Corinthians 10:5, bringing every thought into captivity. When it says bring every thought into captivity, it's replicating his own thinking. Every thought was brought into captivity to one issue in his mind when he was down here. What does Father want? It's for Father or forget it in his thinking, period. That's an absolute in his thinking. All right? We are a subset of that thought. Well, when you reach that final box, everything in your thought pattern, it's as a standard. It doesn't mean that you're competent at it. It's a standard. Everything is a subset of my Lord, my Lord, my Lord, my Lord, my Lord, my Lord.